Maternal love is the greatest emotion in nature. Especially in human society, a mother's love for her child is the purest and most selfless, expecting nothing in return. It is precisely because of maternal love that early humans developed the concept of filial piety, thereby taking a unique evolutionary path that set them apart from other species and ultimately enabled them to become the dominant beings on Earth. Therefore, filial piety is one of the most important distinctions between humans and other creatures, and it is also the earliest form of human culture. Lu Mu, d. 18 CE, was one of the earliest leaders of peasant uprisings against the rule of Wang Mang in the late Western Han Dynasty, and the first female leader in Chinese history to lead a peasant rebellion. Lu Mu originally had a happy family. Her husband was a successful businessman, and they lived in comfortable circumstances. Unfortunately, he passed away early, leaving Lu Mu and her only son, Lu Yu, to depend on each other while managing the family business he left behind. Lu Yu received a good upbringing from an early age. He was filial, upright, and eager to learn. Although born into wealth and the envy of many as a privileged son, he did not rely on his family's fortune. Instead, he took a position as a junior security official in the county government. At that time, it was the late Western Han Dynasty during Wang Mang's reform period, when society was in turmoil, people were displaced, and banditry was rampant. Young and full of vigor, Lu Yu was determined to protect his neighbors and contribute to maintaining order in the local community. Seeing her son's ambition, Lu Mu felt deeply gratified. Unfortunately, events did not turn out as she had hoped. In 14 CE, the inexperienced Lu Yu was executed on the county magistrate's hasty orders for failing to punish common people who had not paid their grain taxes on time, as instructed. When the tragic news arrived, Lu Mu was overwhelmed with grief and fainted on the spot. For a widow to lose her only son is the greatest misfortune in a mother's life. Yet when relatives and friends came to console her, Lu Mu did not outwardly display excessive sorrow. She knew that, relying on her own strength alone, she could not avenge him. So she buried her grief deep within her heart and turned it into hatred. A blood debt must be repaid with blood. Lu Mu resolved to personally kill the cold-blooded magistrate and use his head to honor her son's spirit. Lu Mu had made up her mind. She took out millions from her family fortune to open a tavern, purchase swords and weapons, and provide relief to the poor. When some young men came to buy wine but had no money, Lu Mu would often let them drink on credit. If they were in difficulty, she would lend them clothes and grain. Deeply moved by her generosity, poor peasants gathered in groups to ask how they could help her. Lu Mu said, "Since you cannot sit idle, go and dig out the small stream at the foot of Kuei Mountain. Remember to pile all the excavated earth in one place." Following her instructions, the people took up shovels and hoes, carrying baskets of soil as they deepened and widened the stream. They heaped the dug-up earth into a large mound, forming a raised earthen platform called a guji. This later became the mustering platform for Lu Mu's uprising, and the nearby stream came to be known as Gu River. A few years later, Lu Mu had exhausted her fortune of millions. That year, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, the poor peasants who had long benefited from her generosity gathered together and raised money and clothing to repay her. Lu Mu refused to accept it and, in tears, said, "I have helped you many times not to seek profit or wealth, but because the county magistrate was unjust and wrongfully took my son's life. I wish to avenge him. Brave men, will you lend me your strength?" Already enraged by Wang Mang's brutal rule, the peasants were further inflamed when they heard of their benefactor's injustice. As one, they agreed to follow her, determined to fight the authorities to the death and avenge her son. After careful planning, Lu Mu brought out the swords and armor she had purchased earlier and quickly assembled an uprising force of several hundred people. Leading the rebels, she launched swift and elusive attacks against government troops along both banks of the Gu River and across the coastal regions, taking the lead in resisting taxes and levies while recruiting more followers to expand their strength. At that time, the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River were struck year after year by floods, droughts, and locust plagues. Coupled with heavy taxes and levies, large numbers of peasants were driven into ruin. Many displaced farmers flocked to join the rebel army, and before long its ranks grew to several thousand. In 17 CE, Lumu ascended the earthen platform on the western slope of Kuwei Mountain to offer sacrifices to heaven, proclaimed herself a general, and organized her forces. She personally led 3,000 brave fighters in a mighty march toward Hike City. After a fierce battle, the rebels captured the city in one stroke and seized the county magistrate alive. Some local officials knelt before Lumu, repeatedly kowtowing and begging for the magistrate's life. Lumu rebuked them sternly. "My son committed only a minor offense and should not have been executed, yet he was unjustly killed by this magistrate. A killer must pay with his life, why plead for mercy?" She then had the magistrate executed on the spot, took his head to her son Luyu's grave as an offering, and afterward returned to hide along the coast. From then on, Lumu's fame spread far and wide. When the news reached Langya Commandery, the governor dispatched troops to Hike County to suppress the uprising. Faced with the overwhelming approach of government forces, Lumu calmly directed the rebels. Some withdrew southward by boat along the Gu River, while others retreated on foot along its banks. They later regrouped and settled on nearby islands. At the time, Wang Meng's restoration of ancient systems had failed, and his regime intensified exploitation while waging constant military campaigns. Unable to endure the hardship, many impoverished peasants from the surrounding areas flocked to join Lumu. Within a year, the rebel force grew to more than 10,000 people. On the islands, they cleared land for farming and went out to sea to fish, living frugally under harsh conditions. This force moved unpredictably on both land and sea. Whenever an opportunity arose, they would land and strike at government troops, delivering heavy blows to the rule of the feudal authorities. Lumu's courageous struggle greatly alarmed Wang Meng. Seeing that military suppression had failed, he sent envoys to persuade the rebels to surrender in an attempt to break up the peasant uprising, but all such efforts failed. In 18 CE, Lumu died of illness. The rebel force she had founded later returned to the mainland, joined other peasant uprisings, and continued to resist Wang Meng's tyrannical rule. Maternal love is a human instinct. With the birth of every child, a mother gains another concern, always fearing that the child may make mistakes while growing up. From an early age, she teaches the child to be filial, to obey parental guidance, to respect elders in the family, and to get along harmoniously with siblings, nurturing a kind heart and a gentle, polite attitude. Outside the home, she hopes the child can interact harmoniously with all members of society. This constant, attentive care is maternal love. Yet whenever a child suffers unjust harm or attack, a mother will step forward without hesitation to protect them, even at the cost of her own life. This, too, is maternal love, an instinct of humanity. Mothers bear the great historical mission of human reproduction and continuation. However, throughout history, politicians have often sought to seize control over children from their mothers, turning those precious children in a mother's heart into tools for power struggles and cannon fodder for war. War is the greatest harm to human society. In modern times, wars are not only fought over land and resources, but are also largely driven by hatred. Eliminating hatred depends on humanity's return to its innate goodness, and the core of goodness comes from filial piety, which in turn is shaped by early childhood upbringing within the family, especially maternal love. History has shown that progress in material civilization alone cannot eliminate war. Only when humanity awakens to spiritual civilization, restores its innate goodness, places importance on family education, and renews the responsibility of parents toward the next generation, teaching children filial piety and kindness, can the world gradually move toward peace.